a presentation on the rights and the claim to the estate rights within Ukraine and Crimea before it broke up as a solution was offered to the embassy of Russia and Ukraine to have a referendum to bring Crimea as part of the staging grounds for the family of not Brunswick as successors of the Goths. Yes, this was recorded. This was finalized and sent to the embassies during the protests long before there was any idea to make a referendum for Crimea. So we have already the evidence and proof, but we also want to show you the rights. Just real quickly, you can go into more detail later, but before we get into this topic of the Romanov Imperial House, we're going to get into some of the base rights and the original bloodline of Romanov and getting into the actual legal rights codified by the last several emperors of Russia and put into law who were the successors, when they were killed, why they were killed, and who had the rights to succeed in the house of Romanov in Russia. So, but first of all, a lot of people just don't know much about the House of Brunswick. They have no idea all the imperial rights and laws and treaties that were passed as recently as 150 years ago in favor of Brunswick retaking all German estates. Okay. And reiterating these treaties down into recent times. The last upheld in court was in 1935, where our great uncle Ulrich was killed at Geneva after writing his books and dedicating his life to this topic of our imperial rights. And he fought in battle in war against Prussia, who was encroaching on our rights. Okay, and he fought under the flag of Brunswick and the French flag against Prussia. Okay, and fought and republished all of his grandfather's documents of asserting and proving our imperial rights, which were guaranteed by treaty in the United States, which were guaranteed by the treaty in France. Also, the reigning government of the time is the same government today, with a duly elected French president who happened to be Emperor Napoleon III, who passed this Treaty of Ham, as was drafted in the UK Parliament. Okay, the list goes on and on. We have treaty laws, Switzerland. We have a lot of law going on, and we have the Duke of Brunswick making the Treaty of Our Inheritance with America, which was passed in both houses unanimously and by presidential proclamation in 1856, passing the law of the treaty, okay, of our inheritance as Brunswick nationals in America. Brunswick Inheritance Law Treaty. Anyone can look it up, okay? But to get into that, what's all being protected here, which is even in the Treaty of Ham, all estates, just like it is in the last will of the Duke, all the estates, okay, that were withheld also, okay, all the estates, it says, and Hanover's in specific, not being his natural family, was divorced for their treason, and they were all sentenced to death, which was his edict of 1823 and forward. Okay, this continued to be, or sorry, 1827 and forward, this continued to be the law of the absolute head Duke of Brunswick, who only had such rights. Okay, so going forward, we have all these branches of today, and a lot of people just aren't familiar with them. But this is what all culminates in Brunswick. Carolingian are really old Imperial French. Okay, Witwatersrand. This is really large part of Germany, known as the Greater Saxony. Okay, it takes up all the way into East Frisia, okay, and all the way through the Baltic. But with the Billigen branch, okay, a lot of people know this branch from this shield here, the lion, the blue lion with the hearts. They know that these are falsely called Viking horns. Originally, this is the Welfen shield, which inherited down to the Billinger. Welfen were Bavarian dukes, all of that area there, Göttingen and so forth, all married in. Okay, so it all merged in certain ways. But these horns here with the peacock feathers were representative. First, they were the buffalo horns, or the longhorn. Actually, it's a little bit bigger than a buffalo or a cow. It's an extinct bull. Okay, and anyhow, the German helmets always have, well, in many cases have larger horns, but in the case of Brunswick, it came to be uh, kind of like eternal harvest, a good harvest is what the meaning is, because these are now two sickles. Okay. Now the SD branch, we're talking about the oldest royal house in Europe, the Italian branch. We're talking about the Welfen branch, which is pre-Charlemagne, also Imperial German branches. Okay, going back to the Welfs, going back way, way into old Ukrainian house of Sicambrians. Okay, just like the Carolingian branch, the Sicambrians go way deep into Ukraine. Okay, so you're going to see a lot in this article. Okay, this is just from a typical drawing of the time on a genealogical chart of the House of Brunswick. Okay, comes from God. Okay, we have many graphs of Brunswick, many territories of princes, fürsten. Okay, uh, so we have counts, princes, electors, kings. Okay, and also markgraf, fürsten. So above markgraf, you have Herzog. Okay, we have many princes that are under, and principalities and grafs or counts who are under the duke. The duke has normally the highest nobility, and it's interchangeable with king. Okay, because these are all monarch positions, and he had nearly always a dozen principalities underneath our mini empire of Brunswick. The Duke of Brunswick had rulership over. And within that, so many imperial governments. And I'm going to go through some of those for those who aren't aware. Let's go and have a look. Okay, just doing a quick look at this chart here. You have on davidrumsey.com, you have this great map collection here. You can look up and just have fun with it. So for people who don't realize all the imperial background of the House of Brunswick and the House of Romanov, as we get down to it, you have way back in there, you have Widukind. Okay, that's a very deep level Duke of Saxony, which fought so long against Charlemagne. Okay, he had his black horse, which was turned to a white horse once he converted to Christianity. Okay, and that continues to be the symbol for Greater Saxony, that greater, larger area which took up much of Germany, besides the rest, which, of course, we know were quite big. So you have Woden, of course, it's way back. So you go back many generations back. Okay, this is part of law, all right, and part of rights. So um, as you can see here, maybe I should just zoom back a tiny bit. Okay. As you can see here, these crowns are the emperor crowns, officially Holy Roman Emperors of this area. And of course, emperor, emperor, emperor lines, okay, all the way down. This is just a few of the lines, okay? And then, of course, you have the British emperors, okay, down, down, down. Okay. Now, we're looking, of course, at the Wolfenbüttel Brunswick line, the senior dukes, not the junior dukes, which were Hanover, always under dispute. They never should have become an electorate. Every single prince debated it against the one vote of the emperor, who had no right. All the electors had to agree to make a new electorate. So it was always under dispute and under war. And the same year, they went and became the princes of England. So they couldn't fight them any longer. They left Europe. So the Hanover electorate kind of stood, but still was illegal. Okay, and it's been maintained by every single person of Germany. Okay, of every single princely house. All right. So you have going down. You have okay. Let's look at some more emperors of our house. You have Otto the Fourth of Brunswick going down. Emperor Frederick was killed right after being elected. You have a few up in here also where they're given for example, Henry received the full imperial everything, given from his grandfather. Uh, actually, which one was that? Henry, the Superb. Okay, he was given through his father-in-law. Actually, this he was given the rights of being the emperor, and the Pope sided against him and elected Conrad instead. Okay, so there were some debates here and there, but for the most part, the house has stayed an imperial house throughout all time. Now we're going to go down into some of the Russian branch. This is what's kind of relevant to our study, and the rest has just been extra for you, free of charge. Okay, let's get down into this side. Brunswick Wolfenbüttel. All right. Yeah, there's tons of British kings, British emperors. Okay, that's the younger branch. Let's get into the senior branch here, Wolfenbüttel. All right. Um, you have, of course, Duke Rudolph of Brunswick, Wolfenbüttel. His grandson Peter II was the last agnatic descendant of the House of Romanov, although primogeniture could be with female lines. Okay, and you can still consider them primogeniture, which was of the first a female. This is the norm of the house, the norm of all the royal houses of the peers of Russia followed the principle of primogeniture, and this was pretty well undisputed. Okay, now there was the Maria Theresa. This is talking about Austria here. Okay, Austria, the other children descendant of the House of Wolfenbüttel Brunswick. Then you have, of course, Ivan, okay, who was born Ivan, Duke of Brunswick, um, from Ulrich, his father, Duke of Brunswick, became the Tsar of Russia. Okay, male line, okay, Brunswick, Duke, with the primogeniture, line of succession in the house to become a Duke of Brunswick. So if the right number of dukes died, he could have been head of the House of Brunswick and head of Russia. And he was pretty well set up for it. He could have been heads of both, okay, according to the House laws. But he was imprisoned. This was all illegally done by a House coup, okay. This was a French paid. His aunt, who was of the younger branch, okay, who also was against the law on another front, not only from the blood right. Okay, she led this palace coup against other laws that were passed besides just the primogeniture law, and by force and violence only, illegally took away the and imprisoned her young nephew Ivan, the true Tsar of Russia. Okay, the Duke of Wolfenbüttel, Brunswick. All right. And you know what law that was Peter the First, the brother of, the father of Ivan the Fifth. Okay, Ivan it's very important to know who was firstborn and secondborn and all of this, right? So Ivan the Fifth and Peter the First co-ruled together. All right, and they had passed uh, laws and so forth, and one of them they passed. So Ivan the Fifth was firstborn, so he had the highest rights. Okay, but he kind of struggled and wanted help of his younger brother Peter. So Peter the First had his own line of succession, and he got passed a law there, and even this was in violation. The coup was in violation of his law, and his law that was passed was that the monarch can designate the next heir. And guess what? The last monarch designated the heir to be Ivan the Sixth. Okay, so you had many laws, not only the primogeniture and senior laws of firstborns and so forth, and firstborn branches, but you also had this. So, but what happened was this palace coup. Okay, the aunt took over. So, what was her name? Okay, I've brought her up on the screen. Elizabeth of Russia. Okay, after her illegal palace coup, she just went about imprisoning everyone who was related to the house. Okay, of course, the uncle, who was Duke of Curlin at the time, who was courting her earlier on, that was Ludwig Ernest, the Duke of Brunswick, also Duke of Curlin, which is now Latvia. He was uh, commander in chief of the Netherlands military, and also for Austria, who's considered a a high field marshal and had the title of Protestant commander in chief in the Austrian army, of course. Same Austrian house there and same family, as I was just showing there. And here it is, up here, uh, Anthony Ulrich, okay, and the family here, Anthony Ulrich, this one, uh, his elder brother, okay, and there's another one, Ernest Ferdinand, Duke of Curlin. So you have all these Netherlands different um, connections here. Here's another one at Netherlands, daughter of the stadtholder. So different Brunswick dukes were all intertwined with uh, the Netherlands Protestant government there. Okay, and one that's not even listed on here is Louis Ernest, and he became quite big and important for three monarchs in a row for the Netherlands. Was the chief of the military and kept things really together. And of course, Den Bosch is named after him. It's a part of the Netherlands where his capital, was kept. Okay, it's worthwhile to mention that at the time, Mecklenburg. Okay, this was where they were born. This kind of connection here. A lot of this came from this tie, marrying in with Mecklenburg on this last branch that came in as the last descendants of the senior house of Ivan the Fifth. Okay, of course, he's son of Ivan the Fourth, Ivan the Terrible. Very important branch. We're going to get into that too. But quite important here is to realize that Mecklenburg was occupied at the time by Austrian imperial order, Maria Theresa's government here. She ordered, okay, and only one family of the Dukes of Brunswick, again, was that Duke Louis Ernest. He was the only duke who stayed sided with Austria. And actually, the rest of the Dukes of Brunswick were going to war against Austria, and they were sided with Prussia. So on that occupation time, occupying Mecklenburg, Duke Louis inserted troops there, and they later became, which were chamber high officials in the government of Brunswick inside of the Netherlands, and they came from Mecklenburg after that occupation. Now, the occupation was ordered by an imperial warrant, charging that Brunswick would occupy Mecklenburg. At the time, Mecklenburg had Russian troops stationed there, and they were preparing to go to war against Austria. Of course, you knew there's the First and Second Silesian Wars, which were Austria against Prussia there also for those estates. And Brunswick remained somewhere in the middle. You had some of the dukes siding with Prussia and some siding with Austria. Of course, we have Olsnika, which is one of the oldest Piast alloys, which was blood right also of Brunswick. And you had the Piast Olsnika, which remained, this alloy stayed with the House of Brunswick and remains today in the official um, international estate rights of Brunswick as a principality. So that's only one imperial branch, not really related. Okay, Pius had a different system, but they also allowed, and it was recognized, various primogeniture, and as well as even female rights of succession. But this study is more to get into the Russian lines. So let's get deeper into it. It gets real interesting here. So just hang on for a great time here. Although the private association called Facebook has banned me and hundreds of my excellent posts from their associate platform for associates only, for their community standards only, who don't say the words the way they say it. And if you say a word they don't like, they can ban you and remove you off their platform. And we know the censorship goes quite deep and quite far. We still have various remnants of what all was going on in Ukraine at the time. For example, at Priory Salem Institute of Peace Studies, uh, when I was called upon as a royal protector to oversee part of this transition effort. As everyone could see, it was clear since I came there before the initial protests began. Actually, the day that the first roadblocks happened, I was closing up my work there. I had met together with the knights, the Cossacks knights, and my heart really went out to the people there. I did special patriotic prayers for the people. Actually, we should say more nationalistic prayers. Patriotism has nothing to do with national or race. Patriot just means changing all the time for whatever new laws or whatever radical politics want to go on, that you just kind of go along with it. That's patriotism. Now, nationalism is staying to your tribe and staying to your people, staying to your law. Okay, patriotism will break law and totally slash it and dice it into pieces and say, oh, we're doing people's rights and so on and so forth. You got now hundreds of different new things calling itself rights. I don't know, marrying your hamster is a new right. And if you don't promote marrying your hamster, now you can become the enemy, they say, and they could shoot you as an enemy combatant eventually, so on and so forth. The rights change every single day. We can't keep up with it. And things that have always been considered a felony crime, now it's called a human right, and safety training must be followed, or you can go to jail, or you can get fined. If you don't go to one of the 1,500 per year gay pride events in the city of San Francisco for the children to attend, the semi nude protests, then you are also in violation of human rights, safety training, so on and so forth. And you can have your kids taken away. You can be fined, imprisoned, your whole life destroyed in that whole woke mentality, and that's called the new freedom. So of course the total opposite was the effect, just the freedom to follow God's laws for the first several hundred years of Christendom in America, where the original constitutions also said for God and for his laws and for the advancement of the kingdom of Jesus Christ on earth. You can look it up. Every single state had something to that effect. But in any case, we do see that there are things being preserved and there are things still up online that show you. You can probably find on archive.org quite a bit, but you can find the records and see the protests and so forth, as I was asked to be a protector after that pilgrimage and to oversee some peace situations, just to pray for them, so on and so forth. And we did see some solutions with Crimea, and that was also in the official documents that went on. And this was before anyone thought about a referendum. This was still when Petrinovich was there in Ukraine and Kiev, and he was just about ready to flee. Everyone saw the Molotov cocktails, all the government stuff being taken down. You know, it was at the last moments, and these kind of urgent negotiation documents were sent back and forth and translated into Russian, and were officially filed at the embassies. So I have this and several more of originals and emails, so on and so forth. I just wanted to say this because look, I did have a heart for the people long before I thought about the rights, and yeah, there are quite a bit of rights. A lot of the rights are exerted on the side of the not branch, as we know. Some strong line branch of Saxony in England relating to my house of not on this branch of not Brunswick. Okay, this branch had sent so much of the treasure to Kiev at those early founding times of the Kiev Rus. And of course, princesses, the earliest princesses of Kiev, were from England also. So that was part of the in part of the exertation of protection. But we see in the Brunswick branch quite a bit more. I know at the time we had a transition phase in the house between my father and the final steps of it translating to myself as senior head duke. So we had that all where most of the claims we may just mention the branch of not, and then the emphasis after about I think was it 2015, the emphasis was a little bit more on the Brunswick uh, claim and rights. And so if you read some of the older documents, it may seem to slant that way, although you can look at some older documents, our 2009 videos, and so forth, exerting my rights for Brunswick in 2009. This is on our trademarks, so on and so forth, as well with the archive proof. But in any case, we're going forward with a long history of claim, and I just wanted to get forward on this next point, and you to know that we do really much care about the people. After that pilgrimage for the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a celebration of Christ's birth on the Hebrew calendar, the original calendar, which is also mentioned in the Acts and the Constitutions of the Apostles, we had, of course, that great time where there was an outpouring of the Spirit and prayer time for the people there who were in the struggle. The EU situation, the vote there of not accepting Ukraine, and the nationalists saying, "Hey, we don't want a part of that because they're trampling human rights of the children and families." To still call mother mother and father father, and to still call marriage between a man and a woman, these were core central, so core important things of Christendom that I prayed and poured out my heart for these people. And I really felt since then I have never become apart from them, but we are together as one in prayer. But as I've made an effort to show you some of the Russian rights of the House of Brunswick, which, by the way, are not a focus of our house, but our focus is within our German lands and estates, okay? Um, but we do have a right, and I'll bring it to light to you. It is a sovereign inheritance right. Okay, it's not something I look for. There is a common Christian religious glue that binds us all together. Okay, but let's turn to more of the questions about why Ukraine. Besides the ancient tribal reasons, for example, the Franks being descendant of the Sicambrian Ukraine tribe, there's such a common tribal foundation. Okay, let's get into the subject of the rights and the responsibilities of the Goths. Okay, one of the most core tribes of Europe, and their chief representatives in the house of the Kiev Rus. There is a small booklet on the topic posted online. You can reach it at standrewsocc.org or at orthodoxchurch.nl. All right. There you can read this more at length. Here's the main table of contents. All right. We have quite a bit of the lines and showing the culminations in the House of Brunswick. Okay. As far as the title of Brunswick, Göttingen, as you saw there, that flag is the main coat of arms and flag of Göttingen, as you see here. Um, no coincidence, I would assume, that it just so happens to be colors of Ukraine. These colors are those of the House of Brunswick that numerous armies have fought under, including imperial leadership of the whole uh, legions of Germany as commander in chief. So many times, led by Dukes of Brunswick. Okay, not only from the Austrian Holy Roman Emperor, but Prussian ranks, Poland, the Ulan cavalry are one of the biggest ones. Okay, you know the winged hussars, Husaria. Okay, they were headed by these flags as the chief successor house was also of the PS line fully recognized. Okay, by Poland, that the House of Brunswick is the chief representative of the PS and the formal ceremonial successors of the winged hussars. And you can see the latest uniforms of the cavalry are with the winged kind of very strange, but they trace back to the winged hussaria of Poland. And why they have different wings here and there and their regalia, you can research it out. It's quite interesting. But this flag is quite important. It is our house flag for hundreds, or if not, maybe more than a millennia. It's hard to trace back how far it goes. But Göttingen became just quite a bit of a larger uh, grouping of Nordheim together once the Ottingen emperors of Holy Roman Empire. They needed a larger space, and Göttingen became a larger space, interchangeable with the word Nordheim. Okay, and Nordheim was this part in the Baltic, yeah, well, not far from the Baltic, we should say. Uh, Still down there near Luneburg. Okay, this is where our Angli tribe came from. The true Anglo-Saxons are. This is the true core tribe. Okay, so important to know who England is and the covenant people. The word Britain means covenant people. If you want to understand any of our divine rights, you got to know these things. Okay. But Göttingen, okay, well, Gotterreich also from the marriage of Wittekind, okay, okay, Gothia in Sweden slash Denmark, okay, for, I don't know, at least several hundred years. The main title of the men who ruled Gothia had the name Galderreich, all right, Galteric, and Göttingen. Okay, the daughter, I should say, Geva is her name. Geva married Wittukind, so important of a senior branch of Saxony. Okay, and Wittukind eventually, we know he's well known as being putting up the greatest resistance against Charlemagne, and eventually changed the black horse to a white horse, where it now remains as our claim for all of that huge area of Germany. Okay, which was called Saxony. All right. Not today's electorate of Saxony. It has nothing to do, not even an inch in comparison to original greater. We could call it Greater Saxony, I guess, but still it's a different land, a different area, a different title. And that's why it's important to say Wolf and Boodle also, because we're talking about different lands. We're talking about different titles. We're talking about not the new creation after 1815, which Napoleon had a hand in, and which the Council of Vienna had a hand in. They didn't have any rights to mess with our alloys. Okay. But the House of Wolf and Boodle Brunswick not Hanover. Hanover was an illegal electorate, never should have been created according to every single prince of the Reich. Every single elector protested and even went to war to fight to make Hanover not an electorate. Okay, just a junior prince lower of the lower branch. Okay, they shouldn't have become kings of England either, but that's kind of what stalled out the whole thing, where it held, as they were also treasurers of the Holy Roman Empire. So, hey, they had a lot of. That doesn't really go very well for them. It sounds more like Edomites to me. Okay, so in any case, let's get back to the Göttingen line here. Göttingen. Okay, like I said, the Ottonian emperors, the older brothers got all their other greater alloyed estates, right? But the younger branch, the younger brothers, needed a place, so they got Göttingen. Okay, and later they became the second, you know, uh, lower branch, or it's called the younger branch of Saxony. Okay, and that younger branch, together with the elder branch, later culminated both of them down into the House of Brunswick also. Okay, so our imperial blood rights, I can demonstrate it to you in this table that shows the culmination of dozen different imperial lines. Now, a couple of them now are the Gothian lines, which really a lot of people would say, well, there aren't really today a alloyed or a real location for them and all these kinds of things. Well, it's an empire, it's a Reich, and it moves. The Goths are a people first and foremost. Okay, and yes, there are lands named Gothia everywhere from different angles of France, a whole huge province, Languedoc. Okay, to Norway. Okay, then you have Ostrogoth, which is basically all of Italy. Uh, you know, and Visigoth, which took up, between Italy and Spain. Okay, so on and so forth. And later on, okay, of course, we know there's successor tribes, and we're gonna show you the noble branches of their successors. I should be able to show you a thing or two about it if I'm their chief representative. Now we have great other leaders. Okay, we have Ambrose, which is he is at the rank of you could say within the empire of the Goths, quite a high rank, okay, where we have many princes. So the experts abound, and some focus more on the non-Germanic, more on the Nordic side of it, and some more on the eastern side of it, while others on more the western side. Okay, and we are all these minds are coming together to show us some great things here, and I'm going to show you a little bit, and I think you'll find it exciting. But basically, we find a lot of the Goths' lines have a relation back to Pharamond. Okay, Pharamond, an early king of France. Okay, like I said earlier, Visigoths. All right. And of course, a major line, the Balti-Goth dynasty, Imperial Gothia. All right. That big part of France was also called Gothia, later called Languedoc, the very same borders. Okay. Um, and down there you had Brunhilde and the Visigoths, king of the Visigoths, marrying in with the same Frank house. Okay. You had the Prince of Septimania and the Margrave of Gothia. Okay, later down the Alsatia of Albertus, who was Duke of Alsatia. Down there, okay, that line I'm talking about, this great line of Balti. Okay, and it goes all the way down to Raymond the Fourth, who was Prince of Gothia, who was first the leader of the First Crusade. Really, he had the largest army in the First Crusade, and he was the eldest senior prince. And when he waged war, did so in the Holy Land under the name Gothia. Okay, so this branch later, you have Matilda Plantagenet, okay, who married Henry the Lion. Okay, and that's where the inheritance of Brunswick comes down today. Of course, you had the many different emperors after him. Otto the Fourth, Henry, Frederick, so on and so forth, all the way down to today. And those estates were in treaty and in numerous treaties, we should say, and in law to be reclaimed back. All right, was as recent as 1935, all in the court of the custodians. The custodian, which was the city of Geneva, who by their law says that they give at least half of the estates to the natural family, which Hanover was declared officially not natural family in the very same document that empowered them to have control of the finance and have control of all estates, titles, domains, so on and so forth. All of that was transmitted to the natural heir, and we have this is as law of the land. Okay, so that includes the Balti line, the dynasty of the Goths. Let's go over a couple more. That's all included here. I'm just giving you a quick summary. We have the line through the Yingli branch. Okay, Eric VIII, the victorious king of Sweden. He had married Sigrid, queen of all Gothenland, daughter of the Viking Skrogar Tosti, mother of Nut the Great. Okay, and that Nut the Great Saxon line, we know also did quite a bit of dealing with Ukraine. So we have interest looking in that direction. But okay, we have down there through that line of the Yingli, of course, Wolfhild of Gothia. Okay, she, as princess of Sweden and Norway, married Ordulf Billung of Saxony, which one of the last Billingers who their inheritance went to their grandson, Emperor Henry. So the son, actually, I should say, but then the grandson also, Emperor Henry the Proud of Brunswick, and he ruled from the Baltic to Sicily, quite an expansive area. Okay, Wolfhild. Okay, of Gothia. So that is one major branch, and like with the Baltic branch, these are titles that transmit down to Brunswick today. So we have many directions, including the many directions of the Amali line, a very important dynastic line of the Goths. The mother of all French kings is Argolta. Okay. The early branch of the Guelphs, Brunswick and senior branch, as you can research and look back into our any of our tables of Guelph. It's an unshakable fact that the Frankish kings absorbed and took over a major Gothian title for the part of France now known today as Languedoc. Okay? That whole region was known as Gothia, the whole larger region. Now, Languedoc is a huge province there, that whole part, sometimes called Septimania, but it is a large area known as Gothia. The total borders are now called Languedoc. Go look on any map; it's quite big. So the name Gudok, it kind of holds the name Goth in it, but we have that as part of the sub principality titles down in the French royal family, held down to today. Of course, Brunswick has maintained a very high claim on France and has been high in the line of succession. Okay. Now, many know that Prince Raymond the fourth of Gothia and Toulouse, he led the biggest armies of the First Crusade, and that he was an equal peer of the King of France. Ever since the Frankish Prince Alberchi married Argota, the daughter of Theodemir Amalus, King of Gothia, the sister of Theodoric Amalia, King of Gothia and Italy, and had a son, Duke Vambertus. The title stuck with the family, and it's in the official histories, thus making him not only heir of Gothia via his mother, but also the grandson of the Sicambrian Ukrainian descendant Davidic king Pharamond. Yes, we're going back to what's called Britain. Okay, we're talking about covenant man. And if you look, this is a major stock of today's Britain. The we now call them, of course, the Normans through the Norman invasion. The same original people. Okay, So we have that line of Pharamond on his father's side. So that's an established link in the old Gothia Crimea. Okay, that whole area of Crimea was called Gothia also. Okay. And there, in Gothia Crimea, the Gothic runes are used in the liturgy of the church, as you can ask and discuss with our brother Archbishop Ambrose. And that is more similar to the Greek letters. It's also indisputed that the next in succession, Gothian's son Arnoldus, founded the line of which Charlemagne is descended. The Guelphs Brunswick house is descended from the granddaughter of Arnoldus, Princess Gertrude. That's one of the more well-known lines. We have several other lines back to Charlemagne with some of the highest rights claiming to the Carolingian Empire imperial line of Charlemagne. So let's get to the next step. So there were continual protections of Crimea throughout the centuries in one form or another. You have Kaffa, that part of Gothia, Crimea, which was Genovese territory from time to time. We see in the history books that the House of Guelph, of course, it's the main branch of Brunswick, continued to keep nobles there uh, throughout recent times. More than a dozen crusades were declared against the invaders of Crimea, and very few heeded the call. There was a post kept by the Guelphs there to do what they could to maintain the land for our original tribal people. And there have been representatives, mostly, let's say, of late, from it transmitted from Greek over to Russian, and now the Catacomb Church and a few different canonical decisions brought out the current state of the church there, and it is functioning. The Goths are a people in Crimea, and that's important. And we want to see it continue to be protected as this minority people. But let's have some looks at these lines of Gothia as it relates to Kiev Rus, okay, and the Brunswick lines. Although, as I demonstrated, there are several. There's one Kiev Rus line here, which, of course, also Brunswick is the successors of, which I have to show you next. Of course, the Rurik family descends from several lines of Gothia as well. The early Kiev Rus house of the Romanovs is very important to know that they descend from Gothia. Okay, so here we have these two lines: Kiev, Rogvald of Westergotland, Gothia, Prince of the Polos. Only heir was Roganda. Down the line, their second son, King Yaroslav the Wise. Okay, and then on the right hand side, we have all the way down to Ordulf Billing of Saxony. These are important lines of several of the lines. But these two are closely related between Kiev and Brunswick. Here we can better show you with color these founding branches of the House of Gothia in the lead up to the founding lines, okay, of Brunswick and the founding lines of the Kiev Rus. Very important lines. This slide you can pause and study and get a little bit deeper into it as it lays things out. As the main coat of arms of Brunswick contains this French coat of arms, it continues to be a perpetual claim. On the right hand side, this blue lion and hearts is the main Schleswig-Holstein Gothia land, okay, and continues to be the chief heraldry of the house, okay. And some would say it's the Billinger side, and Billinger is the most well-known descendant of the Ameling line of the Goths. Okay, so these descendant lines, for more than 1,000 years, these have continued to be the heraldic arms, which has its weight in international law and claim, and has continued to be upheld in names mentioned, and tribal items that have continued to be upheld. So we have these lines of Gothia and Crimea kind of culminating, and we're going to go to a little bit of a deeper root here, as extracted from our main culmination of a dozen dynasties of imperial strength and power. We have this great line here from the original Grand Dukes of Kiev. Okay, Kiev Rus, the original royal line, descended down to the royalty of the Romanovs, of course. And we're having a quick look at it. And of course, descended down to the Dukes of Brunswick, right? Grand Duke of Kiev, okay, all the way back. But if you want to look at some of the core roots, Rurik the First of Kiev was father of Vladimir the Great. He married Rogenda of Polotsk, as we had shown, Princess of Västergotland, Sweden. Now, the son, Vladimir, was father of Yaroslav the First, the Wise, Grand Prince of Kiev. And who did he marry? He married Ingigerd of Gothia of Alaskotgring, King of Sweden, father of Vesivold the Kiev. Okay, and down the line, Dukes of Kiev, Dukes of Kiev, Dukes of Kiev, all the way down, Grand Duke of Kiev to Vladimir. And finally, they started being called Prince of Novgorod, Grand Prince of Kiev, Moscow, and Novgorod became part of their titles. You have Ivan the First. Okay, you got down to all the way Ivan the Third, Fourth, down to Emperor Ivan the Fourth, the Terrible. Okay, primarily their title was Grand Dukes of Kiev. Sometimes their titles were called of Moscow, some of Novgorod. Patriarch Filaret of Moscow was father of Tsar Michael I Romanov, the first Romanov emperor. So it goes down on the line. Okay. The next blood descendant, Emperor Alexis, firstborn of Tsar Michael I. Alexei Petrovich, we know, married Empress Charlotte of Wolfenbüttel, as shown in the earlier chart, the Brunswick blood. Okay. Emperor Ivan Ivanovich to Kiev. So we have now Ivan the Fifth. It's our important line is the Ivan line. That's the important line of Brunswick. So we later have, okay, the daughter of Ivan the Fifth, mother of Grand Duchess Anna Leopoldova of Mecklenburg-Schwerin. Of course, it was under occupation. Mecklenburg was under occupation of Brunswick at the time, under imperial warrant and order, charging that Brunswick would occupy the land. So the Holy Roman Emperor Austria sent Duke Louis Ernest of Brunswick, who was commander-in-chief over three armies, large, from all of Netherlands. Of course, there was the Alt Wolfenbüttel army, the old, and of course, Austria, okay, a high grand field marshal. So, Grand Duchess Anna was the last of the line of the premature line of Ivan V. So, her son, naturally, Emperor Ivan VI of Wolfenbüttel, was sole heir and son of Ivan V, who was the senior branch of the Romanovs, competing with the cadet branch, of course. Peter I is his daughter, okay, say so-called. His daughter was paid by the French to wage a coup, okay, and They usurped the house in violation of the house primogeniture law and the norms of all the peer houses of primogeniture law, but also the law of Peter the First himself, who designated that the monarch, he codified that the monarch would designate the heir who will succeed. And that's exactly what happened with Ivan the Sixth, the last monarch designated the heir as Ivan the Sixth. When she died, Ivan the Sixth, as a 1-year-old boy, became emperor, and his mother was regent. Grand Duchess Anna became the regent. Duke Louis of Wolfenbüttel Brunswick, the elder uncle, which I've been mentioning a few times here, was espoused to Empress Elizabeth of Russia, well, Duke of Kurland, and rightful heir at law by official law of Russia. Remained an Austrian field marshal, a Protestant general field marshal of the Holy Roman Empire, commander in chief of Wolfenbüttel, the regent commander in chief of the Netherlands as Den Bosch, okay, protector of 3 generations of monarchs in The Hague, unifying Groot Netherlands provinces, making the greater land of what Netherlands has today. All of Brabant was brought in, Noord Brabant, it was called, taken from the Belgians and brought in to be part of the Netherlands. All right. Brunswick remained peer of Russia, co-protectors. Okay, all baptisms of the dukes were attended by the emperor themselves of Russia. Okay, they recognized our rights in primogeniture succession law. This was reinstated in 1797. 1762, Ivan VI, when the palace coup happened in the 1740s, okay, he got he didn't get released till 1762 at the death of his aunt. When she died, he was getting released from prison, and the prison guard shot him. So he was true emperor at law. He was heir, and he was emperor. He already was crowned rightfully according to all the laws of Russia. So he was emperor upon his release, and he was shot by the prison guard. Someone paid him, or he did something he shouldn't have. So that put back into place that as an estate of Brunswick, this should go down the chain of the line through the inheritance laws of Brunswick, which would have been to the next in line senior duke. If you also consider the 1797 reinstatement of primogeniture law in the House, this all comes down to Brunswick today. Some may dispute it, but for the most part, it is pretty well indisputable that primogeniture law and the actual emperor himself, which some people just like to forget, he was emperor when he was killed. So, with most estates, including numerous larger kingdoms, larger principalities, passed to the head duke. If you want to talk about Olsnica, if you want to talk about East Friesland, you want to talk about Saxony, you want to talk about England and the laws of England, if Hanover couldn't produce an heir, Wolfenbüttel Brunswick remained second in line of succession. Even though they're such distant cousins, so long, not apart, okay, still, Britain recognized the house law of the House of Brunswick and the governing principles that the firstborn branch, which they recognize the ducal branch of Wolfenbüttel was senior to that of Hanover. So you couldn't just jump over Wolfenbüttel, although they did with Queen Victoria, and somehow snugly put Charles II of Wolfenbüttel third in line of succession during the majority of the 1800s. So maybe Britain isn't a very good example, as they did change their internal laws, But if you continue with house law as it would still be estates, whether it be Britain, whether it be Poland, for example, Olznica, which was a capital of the Piast, several larger dukedoms of Poland. Uh, this would have gone back to the next eligible senior duke. Okay, Saxony has that in their law, their succession law also. So we're going to stop with that and get on to the next topic. The nephew of the reigning Tsar of Russia, who was attended by the Tsar of Russia at his baptism. Okay, Charles II died in 1873, and his successor in 1935 assassinated at Geneva. And our successors of our line continuing on today, just a normal cadet branch who, by house law, has to succeed, although the extinct branch of Hanover was made extinct by law, by decree, by edict, and by the will, by the last will and testament of the Duke. Recognized worldwide, even Otto von Bismarck recognized Hanover had no inheritance in Germany and handed it directly to the city of Geneva, the custodian of all the rights of our house, who was to keep it until natural heir comes forward with claim. So that was the law. That was the background of what Charles II put everything into so it would not fall into the wrong hands. You can read more about our house through our various websites. St. Andrew's OCC is a church website. There's the Priory of Salem pages, which is also a outer uh, nonprofit organization, religious order. You can look up through houseofnot.blogspot.com with some of the older stuff. For example, this document here filed at the Russian embassy and the Ukrainian embassy, so we could try and move something forward. I was asked to be a protector in this matter. It is known my past activities where the Secretary of State was involved and the U.S. Attorney General asking that I be excluded because of the 200 Imperial Knights under my command. They mention and I have the copies under seal. Okay. Um, my attorney received them, and they were demanding the European governments at the time to release me and exclude me from Europe and to immediately arrest me as a imperial leader of a group. They use imperial order in the documents, and that they considered our organization a threat. So you may want to also say, well, did they also believe at the time this was to be taken seriously? I believe that the timing could be that they did take my house seriously once again, as Secretary of State had, and this may as well be, just a continuation of the great imperial steps we are taking just for protection of our people, the rights of our imperial citizens to be able to raise a protest. I mean, the estates of all over Europe could easily write to us, and we could make warrants executing them and occupying the areas where our people are persecuted, where our rights are suspended, or where our rights are attacked. And the human rights, especially, cannot go so long that we wait. For example, they waited 40 years for Nuremberg results. Okay, um, those who went and were suffered by the Nazis. It took 40 something odd years for real results. Do you have 40 years to wait? I think we need to look at Priory of Salem as a great peace institute with solutions that are for the people today down on the ground. Not looking at these kinds of weird legal things down the line which structurally may not make a bit of difference. For example, you know, a passport application that says something like you can't have been a participant as a Nazi in World War II. What difference does that make today? With they're 100, have to be more than 100 years old. Okay, these are the kind of things. It takes forever, for example, for the vaccine injuries to even be known. And 20, 30 years from now, they'll be looking back finally to look at, was it safe, and they're going to find it was like the Nuremberg level of human rights being violated. And then again, what are we going to do? What can we do? So we can associate. The whole world agrees in the freedom of association, and we can vote. Our knights already make a political body, and we are already able to vote. Okay, and our suffrage populations. That means our kind of voting block of people throughout the German states have the right to protest and bring demands to our house as sole arbitrators of the German Empire. This was recognized, and we are what we are. Okay, we operate. We're going forward, and the thing is that it's just by spiritual and divine chance or intervention or however you want to call it, by noble rights. I don't know. We're just a lower cadet branch, which is required by law to succeed when a heir is not available. Okay, and which we have done, which we have followed the law of prescriptive law. There hasn't been a lapse that would have caused our estates to cease to exist. We've continued to keep it alive. Okay, so we have the ability for more people to have more avenues of freedom and to have representation. Okay, we want to see these continue on in the states that are guaranteed in the many treaties, and that we could see are the case also for American citizens per the Treaty of 1855 and 1856 for Brunswick inheritance in America. So praise be to God that this happened, and it's all looking good in all of these areas. Most of all, we need freedom to obey our King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus the Christ. It is the only freedom, really. I mean, come on. For all creation, we groan and travail for the manifestation of the sons of God. Will you be one? Will you rise up? Will you show support and work in our empire and see about solutions? Let's see what we can do. We need full-time workers. We need people who are going to get on staff here. We've never seen any sort of revolution or any of this without full-time staff. Don't anyone tell me that we can get by with just sort of volunteer patriots and all these kinds of things. You know, um, you can't even say that you're responsible as a government if you don't work full time. Now, I'm not saying that I can work full time at the moment. I don't have funding. I don't have capacity to work full time in the government. So there has to be some breakthrough, and people should keep us in prayer. There needs to be the full national revival. Okay, we have to see the whole thing. If it can't be full time, if it can't be all the way, it shouldn't be at all, some would say. And you're doing your people a disservice if you can't do it with all your time and not to spend any time doing anything else, including perhaps, yeah, little things that you wouldn't think of. Okay. We need to be focused for our people, our constituents. Okay. We need to really look at all of that. And I encourage any Christian around the world to think about that. And if you have to run for public office to get the funding as a representative, do it. You won't be able to get in any other way, then do it. There are plenty of people from all sides of the aisle, however you want to call it, who seem radical that don't really seem a real party person, but they're getting the microphone. They're getting the word out and they're overtaking these parties. So let's look at just the normal situations that we have. Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, okay, it is out of the ordinary to restore our absolute rights, and these are divine rights, and we should focus on that because Christ says he's coming back to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's not coming back to be head of the Democrats or some weird thing like this. or republics or any of that. He says kingdoms. The kingdoms of the world are going to be his. Or actually, you should say the kingdoms of the earth will be his. Okay, if you want to really get down to the Greek. All right. So kings of the earth. Who are the kings of the earth? Well, if it's not what alloys I'm showing you, then what is? Now, I haven't even shown you a fraction. We're just looking at Gothia in Ukraine. We're just looking at some of the rights down with Crimea in Ukraine. We're not looking even into the dozen other lines which are substantive for the German claim. We're not getting, and this video, it's just a short video about Crimea in Ukraine. Does that even have any sort of relevance? And I'm saying that I think it does, at least spiritually. Okay. So God will be praised, and we need to get people who want to follow Jesus. Okay. And once we get enough people who want to come out of Babylon, come out of this, limitation of the divine rights, and bringing all these bad constitutional entities in control of the people, and bad parliaments, bad Congress, and so on and so forth that sell out every year to get elected. You don't have to sell out every year if it's hereditary. There's very low corruption in hereditary monarchies, so no one can say a thing about it. We got to look at what's going to be our strong foundation. The Bible says, don't build your house on the sand, but build it on a rock, on a strong foundation. So, really, we should get back to the strong foundations of his dynastic absolute monarchies. Look at getting away from all these new ideas of there's just a new mixing program going on of destroying the rights of the original national people so that they can somehow find new rights, and then it creates a vacuum for these foreign uh, ins- interest groups to set up companies, and then you have them taking the resources and saying, okay, we need to put in a Chinese energy company that'll manage all the getting rid of the way that you do things, and it's just a nonstop thing. When you take away all that foreign power away and you put it in the monarch and you make him accountable, you don't have to look into all that. If it's just for the people, you don't have to look into all these problems of having, like they have today, every single Congress and powerful one is these great millionaires and billionaires making so much wealth off of their families who get in on the deals. This is the definition of corruption in every sense. It normally is supposed to be illegal for a state leader to put his family in to be a owner of the energy company who's going to drive up the prices of the energy over here and raise the taxes on the energy over there in the foreign country, and get all the profits. And they're doing this left and right. Okay, and they're moving contracts over to these companies, and you find the families that own them are these same corrupt politicians. I mean, come on, how much more corrupt does it get? So it's time to reclaim back all the gold of the world, who it truly belongs to, and repudiate our debts and set our people free. Get rid of these debts and put back the might and the power where it belongs. There are plenty who need to be routed, and we're looking forward for what God would do, and we're looking forward for His solutions. His kingdom come and will be done on earth as in heaven. Not only wait till you get up in heaven. It says it's to be done on earth, and so we're going to do it on earth. And if we pray that way and we act that way and we seek that way, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, that means doing it. Righteousness means doing it, doing the law, doing His laws, protecting His laws for His people, which is the true freedom, it's the true peace, and it's the true protection. And He's not coming back, look, till His true covenant people, British means covenant people, okay? He's not coming back until we got our act together. He just said that so many times. Not till all of his enemies are made his footstool, then he'll come back. And we're going to be that kingdom Israel, who's that bride, the same bride of the Old Testament as the bride of the New Testament. Now, that doesn't mean Jew, but Israel and Jew are two words that are not interchangeable in the whole Bible. 1,500 times the word Israel shows up and the word Jew about 20, 30 times in the Old Testament. Mostly it's considered the people of God's curse when it's referring to Jew. No, we don't have to deal with Jews. I mean, just leave them be. We don't have to deal with them, but they're just a situation of power control. And there's a little bit of a brainwashing going on that says, okay, promote them. And, you know, they have this special protection going on in a, some sort of an Esau protection also of the corrupt deeds, which is the part that we don't like. That's this sort of foreign ownership. But yeah, all that's cut off if we just start keeping the commandments. We don't have to worry about any of that. Just get back to God's laws, get back to His system, His treasury, not with these foreign bankers and so forth who are going to make the control. This Esau line, which it says we're going to have bondage under Esau until finally we choose to keep His commandments, and God will raise up the true seed of David once they decide they want to keep the commandments. So we have these promises that the people will be restored. We will get back to the true governance, and that there will be a resurgence of the house of David, the true house of David, as the Christian people of God when they decide they want to keep God's commandments. We've seen that reign of Esau now since at least since the Napoleon French Revolution. You have had this Bolshevism slash French Revolution, like Marxism, which since the 1848 really swept all over Europe, and it's just continued ongoing. Some would argue that it's communism in America, even from the earliest stage. It's really become quite bad once you start to see all this coming down. You have um, even Benjamin Franklin going to the French and getting these big bank loans for the Revolutionary War, going to the Illuminati, the same tyrants who did the whole French Revolution were funding so that we would attack their enemy, Britain. And that continued the War of 1812. They tried to get America to attack Britain, and America thought, well, we can get Canada out of the deal. But what happened in 1812? Everybody was getting arrested when they started fighting against the British, and they're told that they're British citizens. Okay, you're sorry, Americans, you're British citizens, and you're going to be tried for treason against Britain. Now, some of those may have been just because the sea boats, the ships were in international waters, and they were getting problems from that was they're running into the British, the French and the British blocking the American ships with trade. But still, though, if you look what happened in the War of 1812, they shut down that central bank. And what happened? Britain sent the army and burned down the White House, and they captured all the different seaports and took over America basically, and said, "Hey, this is Britain again." Okay, and it wasn't until that sick man, the regent, the same one who tried to take away Brunswick's rights for the Council of Vienna, 1815, was it George the Third or the Fourth? Escapes me at the moment, but the same one, he drew the borders for America and said, "Okay, we give you this peace treaty." And he didn't have the rights for that, and he didn't have the rights to give the new Constitution of Brunswick. So anyhow, and those estates remain sacrosanct with a continual protest from day one. The House of Brunswick, the true senior line, has protested against the House of Hanover. All the estates, including the new constitutional entities that were put up by the same king who also drew the borders for America with those treaties after the War of 1812. And after all of these things going back and forth, whether they're British citizens, also going back and forth with the whole deal, the cores of the matters being people loved their king. They didn't want the parliament, foreign, corrupt parliament, which was half House of Commons, half House of Lords, which were less corrupt. They didn't want all that foreign control. They wanted a local parliament. They wanted a local Congress to protect the people and not to be taxed all the way from Britain without their consent. And the tax was to keep a standing army to fight Britain or Spain or the Indians or whoever. But still, the colonists weren't that much. There's only 3% who wanted to fight against Britain. And they weren't trying to get rid of the king. Most of them loved the king and that whole idea of having a monarchy. they wanted to make George Washington king, and some say that he wrote some letter somewhere that we had no king but Jesus, but no one could find that letter. But in any case, perhaps George Washington did expect the king to stay in control after the Revolutionary Wars. But somehow it got put together that not only the parliament isn't going to tax them, but they're going to have no king. So that could be debatable, as there was only 3%. Did even that, how much percent of that 3% wanted to keep the monarchy? Well, if you check it, most of them didn't want the taxation and they didn't want the parliament controlling the parliament there in Westminster, London, to be running overseas what's going on in America, you know. And these were career politicians, you know. People want to say, "Oh, it was just a couple of ragtag out there, you know, in Virginia, for example, the Virginia Burgess." Okay, these were for decades politicians. Okay, in America, British politicians. Okay, remember, America is nationalists of the British Commonwealth and mostly English stock. Okay, Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Saxon German stock is the number one tribe of America. So if you get back to nationalism, you're going to get back to that British part, that covenant people part of America. So we're looking at, it's so important to see that those weren't just some volunteers who made the revolution. Not at all. Okay. If someone to say a couple of the militia that sneaked in there of that very tiny percent of that very tiny army under Washington, which was totally bankrolled by those central bank loans and by France and by the Illuminati of France, who Benjamin Franklin got the money from, and the arms, all of it from France. Okay, from look, it was. I'm just trying to say that revolutions don't come from just a couple of volunteers with a couple of ragtag guns. All right. If you want to say they do, that's fine. But as far as what I've seen throughout the centuries, I've done some surveys, and there were hardly any time where it's just some hungry guys just looking to make some money. Most of the time, I mean, yeah, there might be some career military man who's stuck out on an island somewhere and they continue to fight, even though they're not getting paid, and they do it to get food. But look, the wars are set up, even the Confederate War. It's just a couple years and the Confederacy was even alive. It has very little to do with the tribe compared to Britain. Okay, all the colonies for 400 years, even for the original ones, the very first constitutions, like for example in Connecticut in 1639, the very first constitution made no mention of Britain, although they all identified as British. And later, the same constitution got adapted to mention the King of Britain. But for centuries and centuries, all those lands, all those original colonies just said that the purpose of their government has one aim, and the one aim that they all are gathered together, and one and the same reason was for the advancement of the kingdom of Jesus Christ and maintaining the purity of the gospel. And so, for centuries upon centuries, this was the foundation of every single colonial um, foundation. So, we're looking at that as their constitution for every single colony. Okay, and it continued to say that's our perpetual confederation and our perpetual union. Okay. And so perpetual means always was and always will be. Okay. That's perpetual. So when you get to today's Constitution in America, it also has the clue there. It says that we're perfecting the union. Okay. We're still working on it. So that tells you that it was pre existing. Okay, the union was pre-existing. It is perpetual. It's the same people, the same culture, the same tribe. There's no difference till today. You still have this. So you have patriotism, which means just whatever this popular politics or mob rule, which is going against the law all the time with new rights that have nothing to do with rights of anything. Okay, and calling it rights when it's something that was a crime for centuries, for thousands of years, and now saying, okay, and they say that they're doing this and that and the other, and they're just busybodies making money, making more corruption, making more destructive programs, okay, destroying. And if you look at these programs, they continue to destroy. Even the war on poverty, 7 trillion has been spent since Lyndon B. Johnson and his war on poverty. It has not lifted up any group of people. It has continued to send them down the tubes. Okay. And we have such a great national debt um, in America. These things just are proof of destruction, does not equate to production. It's going the wrong direction for so long. Imagine the capabilities we all have, the capacity we have. If we're just set free to do as God had originally given Adam to do, be fruitful and multiply, to have dominion. Okay. So we're looking forward to seeing some of that freedom come back. And I believe you're going to see it come through these noble and royal orders. These are important key truths. Remember what if you're a British citizen. Remember if you truly are of the nation of Britain, your tribe of what you are. Okay. Did they want a king or not? Well, that's still to be decided. We know they didn't want the parliament. And do they still want a king today? Well, just remember, it's things aren't what they seem. There's constantly an attack, and there's constantly a threat, uh, and a silencing of people who just spread the light of truth. Okay, but at the end of the day, still the truth prevails, and you still have to deal with the same truths, whether you want to turn your eye from it, whether you want to be ignorant from it, or whatnot. You still have the results. You still got to deal with it. You have here a basic platform God has provided, so use it or lose it. And He doesn't mind coming back and punishing you. He doesn't mind resurrecting the true kings of the earth. The kingdoms of this world will be the kingdoms of our Lord, one way or another. And He's going to see His name be glorified. He's going to see His honor restored in the earth. It says that before the end comes, there's going to be a witness of the kingdom, and then the end shall come. That's what He said. I believe it. And the kingdom has to do with laws and His people doing His laws, His national laws. Yes, the whole Bible is full of nationalist laws. The whole book is a political book. It's all about nationalism. It's all political. And we're going to see it being done in the earth. People say, oh, well, what's going to be fulfilled is just the Jews be ruler of the earth. There's going to be no one else. Well, that sounds a bit silly to me, but the Bible says there's going to be the people doing the kingdom. We need to talk about all that, not just say, oh, all of our tribes are going to be destroyed and just going to have one called Jew. But no, our peoples are going to be strengthened and strong. Gothia and Goths have to do with the people of God. Okay, the original tribal people, the original true Israel people, coming down from these tribes known as the Scythians, and so on and so forth. Um, as it says, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. We have all these different tribes with the name Scythian, like Sicambrian, so many other tribes, where the scriptures are fulfilled that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So that name was given to the lead tribes. The name of Israel itself was proclaimed upon two sons of Joseph. That was Ephraim and Manasseh. It's not upon Judah, but the name Israel was given to those two other tribes. The tribe of Judah only has the birthright. And we know today, modern Judah, true Judah, of the bloodlines of Judah, is primarily the Irish, the Scots, and Germany. And so there are some bits of each tribe in of Judah is mixed among all the true Israel tribes. There are a few of them here and there, but they continue to fulfill that Davidic calling. And one day, when there's going to be, Judah is called the praisers, okay? And when there's going to be a time, they're going to rise up and be praisers. And when there's going to be coming back to his national laws, when the descendants of the true people will decide they want to keep the commandments, God has made a promise. He said, then he will return the kingdom back to the descendants. Until then, he's going to leave them like a chopped tree with just the roots. Okay? But he has made us a promise. We're going to become that great tree again. We're going to become a great kingdom again. We're going to be so strong and powerful, it's going to be unbelievable. We're going to see a great witness of the kingdom before the end has come. Praise be to God. There's so much more to study on this. So many more great messages of victory, which we have available on our website. And if you want to go to it, it's www.orthodoxchurch.nl. I'm going to just show you the main page real quick here so you can get in there and research more about the kingdom. Just be encouraged and uplifted. You're not going to just hear, oh, kind of understand this book or that or the other, but really to get down to the key items. Okay. Here's the website. So I hope you enjoy it. Most of all, pray with us together, the morning and evening prayers. These are all great kingdom psalms. Okay, every last one of them are for our nation and for our people. And it has worked for the British imperial people. It has worked for the true Orthodox nations of the earth. Okay, and we're going to see it continue to work and finally to be fulfilled. People didn't listen when we told them about all these things 30 years ago, but now people are starting to get to the point in the last 10 years and now the last 5 years, people are finally going to listen. So we really have a lot of ground that we can reach. We really have a harvest that's just waiting to be harvested. We have the crops just waiting. Now, sign up for our email newsletter. You can do so by sending us an email, or you can go on and subscribe. Okay. Here, you go to the contact page and you go down and you subscribe here. Okay. So get signed up because look, these things like Facebook and that are going away. We have MeWe, which has a little bit of, it allows you to post some things without worrying about their algorithms that block half the things. But email is now the best way to go. So thank God for it and thank Him all the time and praise Him. In the name of Jesus Christ, may you be blessed and kept in His ways for His prosperity, for His covenant true people, Israel. Amen and amen. God bless you. Bye bye.